Hi, I'm Pete May, the president of GreenBiz Group, and I'm delighted to be here with Jessica Hogle, the vice president, federal affairs and chief sustainability officer at PG&E. That's quite a title, quite a handful you have, Jessica, but it'd be great to start out. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you landed in this role at PG&E and what your role is there.
Great, thanks so much, Pete. Wonderful to be here. I've been at PG&E for 12 years. Prior to that, I worked in Democratic politics, and then I worked for a trade association on climate policy, actually. So brought that experience and expertise into my work at PG&E, again, when I started 12 years ago in our Washington office. Spent most of my career there in the advocacy space. And part of what brought me to the company was the progressive stance that they have on addressing the climate challenge. That was very attractive to me and the values that I hold personally. And over the experience of my career and the experiences within the company and among our customers, grew into taking on the sustainability role about 2 years ago, which actually I think has a nice nexus with federal policy, because sustainability is both, creating long-term value, which is something that you do, especially for industries like ours that are so heavily regulated through public policy. But it's also a way to build trust with your stakeholders, and it speaks to who you are as a company and how you see yourself playing a role in resolving broader societal challenges like climate change collectively. So that's a little bit about what I do at PG&E.
Obviously, we're doing this interview here in Oakland. We're in the operating territory for PG&E. Obviously, we look out the window every day. Wildfires are something that we're reckoning with in very real time, and I know PG&E is. Talk to us a little bit about how are you engaging around climate policy, and what is PG&E advocating for?
It's incredibly important, again, for PG&E to engage in this space. As you mentioned, we're seeing the impacts of and feeling the impacts of climate change directly. I think PG&E has a long history of mitigating the impacts of climate change and working to integrate renewable energy, more cleaner sources of energy onto the grid so that we can reduce emissions that way. But increasingly, we're going to have to focus on how to make our system more resilient to the impacts and adapt to the impacts of climate change as well. And in fact, the vision of PG&E is to, and I'm speaking in shorthand, but essentially to meet the challenge of climate change in a way that leaves no one behind. So our policy advocacy is consistent with that. We look at policies that do both kind of mitigating the impacts of climate change, reducing emissions, as well as increase the resilience of our systems. So we would, advocate for, for example, incentives for renewable energy deployment. Very importantly for us, also a price on carbon is very important. California's experience has shown that you can price carbon and grow the economy at the same time. So for us, having a national economy-wide market-based approach to regulating carbon, pricing carbon, is an economical way to both incentivize the behavior change that we need, send the price signal, and create the business certainty that is helpful and something that our shareholders want, as well as unleash the technology and the innovation that's going to be needed to be able to meet the decarbonization goals that are science-based and actually, avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So those are things that, at the federal level, we advocate for, as well as looking at how do you, again, unleash innovation and technology and do R&D for resilience measures. So, after our experience over the last several years with wildfires and looking at the investments that we can make onto our grid to increase resilience and hardening, technology is going to play a big role in that. Or, using artificial intelligence, using drones, using sensing technology. So that's another area where we would advocate with policymakers and the administration to, again, put some investment, research and development into these technology areas so that we can do this more efficiently and in a cost-effective way for our customers.
So Jessica, that's great to have that context. It'd be great, at Verge, we have an audience from all around the world and particularly all around the US. And as you know, the utility business in the US is a crazy quilt of, there's different utilities in every state and every part of the country. Can you talk a little bit about, obviously you can't speak for the utility sector, but a little bit about what PG&E is doing against the backdrop of, because obviously you work in conjunction with other utilities, but around climate policy, what role is PG&E taking as a kind of a key stakeholder in IOU in the utility segment?
I would say at large, the transitions that PG&E started making, because of California policy and our engagement there, we're starting to see play out on the national scale. And there's a saying, what happens in California tends to move eastward. So I do think that we're seeing that play out, and partly that's because of the economics around it, right? I mean, we've seen increased investor engagement on these issues. They want to ensure sustainable long-term value and growth. And there's a business opportunity here to deliver more clean energy and invest in, electric buildings, electrification of the transportation sector, other things. So I think that as a whole, we're starting to see, we're seeing that shift happen in the industry. The role that PG&E can play is both, sharing best practices with our peers as to what we have experienced and being an early adopter and making sure that others learn some of the painful lessons that we have along the way, but also what has worked well, that they can, potentially try to model that, and vice versa. We learn from our peers all the time and incorporate their best practices as they address some of these challenges going forward. And then collectively, obviously, we work in coalition with each other to advance policies that, support our business priorities and goals. And so, we'll go and advocate together. And sometimes advocacy, you do that up on the Hill, or you do it with the administration or in your state legislatures. Sometimes you do it among your own peers, right? I mean, you have to, you want to lobby for what you think is a good idea or a good policy and gain consensus. And that's a lot of what me and my team also spend our time on. We're working not just with policymakers, but also our peers to, again, find that consensus and become a broader coalition of the willing to try to move things across the finish line.
Yeah, well, that's great. So speaking of the coalition of the willing, Verge is coming up. It's the event we do that brings together the key actors in the clean economy around energy, transportation, and these other areas. Maybe just in closing, why is PG&E has been involved with Verge for some years, but particularly this year, why is PG&E involved with Verge?
Well, as you noted, Pete, we have a long history of engaging with Verge. It's very important to us, and it's important, now more than ever. The challenge of climate change is going to exacerbate some of the broader problems, societal issues that we're seeing right now with the pandemic play out. And frankly, it's going to take a collective approach, and we need to have the broadest coalition of the willing that we can. And Verge does a great job in bringing together, diverse stakeholders from different sectors of industry, policymakers at all levels, technology innovators, and others, so that we can create this ecosystem and identify potential solutions to address this climate crisis and challenge that we have before us. We may think, in the utility sector and in the energy space, that we can provide that kind of foundational level for decarbonization, but we can't do it alone. We need everyone contributing and everybody marching and rowing in the same direction, I think is what they say. So that's why we're so pleased to participate in Verge, and really commend you and your team for putting this together and encouraging this dialogue amongst all of us.
Great. Well, thanks for that. Obviously at Verge, so much to do, and a lot of what we talk about at scale, you mentioned bringing different actors, disparate actors in the room. We can't have this change without the utility segment being a big part of that. So we're really happy that you're part of that. And and look forward to engaging with you at Verge. Jessica Hogle, PG&E, thank you for joining us. It's been great to connect with you here.
Thank you.